Welcome back to the 2019 USA Ultimate College Championships here in Round Rock, Texas. The college championships are presented by Spin Ultimate. You can check them out online at spinultimate.com. It's Becky Thompson here, joined by Emmy Fitzgerald. And Emmy, we have got a last round pool play matchup between Ohio State and Georgia. Ohio State currently at a 1-2 win-loss record. Meanwhile, Georgia at 2-1, so lots on the line going into the bracket.
And really the onus is on Ohio State to make a statement here in this game. North Carolina went 3-0. Georgia already has the 2 wins. So Ohio State really needs 2 wins so both Georgia and Ohio State can be at 2-2 and force some tiebreaker scenarios.
And it could come down to a tiebreak if Minnesota can beat California later this afternoon as well, tying 3 teams at 2-2. But for now, Ohio State will have to do everything they can to put themselves in that position.
And really making a statement early on is going to be key for both teams, but especially Ohio State. They're seeded higher, but not having as favorable of a performance so far in this tournament. But clearly, if they have the higher ranking going into this game, draw on your positive past experiences and use that to propel forward.
So we will get underway here with a person-to-person look right off the bat on defense. There is quite a bit of wind and heat out here today. The wind has picked up as the day has progressed. Taylor looking for an option and shoot to the end zone. It kind of hung up and into the hands of his receiver, and that's going to give a goal to Ohio State right off the bat to start this game.
So Ohio State really showing their offensive efficiency, being able to convert right away. And it looked like it might get a little tangled up because there were 2 offense, 2 defense right there in the end zone. But the trust from Ohio State to really take that down, you don't want to give up a break the first point of the game, but also credit to them for taking care of business.
And we've talked about this before, but how important is being efficient in these conditions?
It is. It's a 3-day, really a 4-day long tournament if you make it all the way to the finals. So anywhere you're playing, whether it's Texas or Wisconsin or Colorado or whatever, it's a long tournament. So the fewer points that you have to play, the better. The fewer minutes you have to play, the better. And you play, especially as an offense, not to have turnovers, to maintain that possession. But now it's Georgia's turn to show everyone what they can do from an efficiency standpoint.
So we'll get a chance to see, as you said, what they can do with their offensive line out on the field now. Centering to the middle, similar person look, almost touch on that disc, an open receiver on that near sideline, and it's bobbled through the hands. Fortunately, Austin Knabb couldn't hang on, and Ohio, an early chance to break. Harmony puts that towards the end zone. Through the coverage, manages to get that grab. Marcus Perry. It looks like there's going to be a call here.
So Ohio State coming up with that 50-50 that was shot to keep the possession alive. And they could register their first break, especially going upwind.
So the disc gets checked back in the middle of the field with Paz, and it gets picked off by the defense. Going right away towards the end zone. That disc dipping in the wind, and Ohio State able to run down. Mark Luke gets a hand to it.
And credit Georgia for wanting to have that field position, but maybe if there was a little bit more angle on that disc, a little bit wider, the offense could have run under it a little bit more.
We've seen field position work out for several teams throughout the weekend already. So right now, Ohio State will try to work it up the field. Richinair resetting the disc to Harmony. Now still on this near sideline. Thought about the huck option. They are on the high side of the field here. Tim Harmony goes inside out. And now the shot to the end zone goes up, but it blades in the wind. That one too low and into the ground.
So credit to Georgia. Their offense is still forcing turnovers to give additional opportunities.
That one sailing and hanging a little bit longer than I think Ohio expected it to there. Trying to track it down. The bid a little bit just for show at the end. I think that disc was always sailing out of bounds. But as you said, Georgia showing that they're willing to grind as Rohrbach tried to work for that one.
And the Ohio State defender had really great closing speed and was able to advance in front of the Georgia receiver. But credit to Georgia for still trying everything he could.
Luke resets that to Agami in the middle, who finds Perry. Agami looking for an option, layout to retain possession. Marshall Paz keeps that in his possession. And then flipped up. Not the most clean from the defensive line of Ohio as it turns over. And great field position here for Georgia. Going to the end zone, but it's over the head. Coleman Tapero, and another execution mistake here.
Yeah, Georgia really needs to convert there. That the throw was high, but you have better options.
So Agami puts that one up that far sideline. Now working it through with Perry, and that one's gonna blade in the wind. And we saw a perfectly clean point from Ohio in the first point of this game, and now both of these teams struggling to get their movement going.
I think nerves are running high. They're kind of trying to settle in.
And right away, a massive layout D from Ohio will pick the disc right away. Tim Harmony showing what he's made of early in this game as he goes up line, but bobbles it off his hands and it sails out of bounds. A lot of players in that area trying to make a play. Harmony taking a second to get back to his feet there.
So really a gift for Georgia. Time to just slow down a little bit.
Austin Nabb puts that to the end zone for an open cut. Gets the goal, Patrick Trent, and they make it 1-1 after a long offensive point.
So it's funny, Becky, we were talking about efficiency in between points, and that was something that Georgia, from an offensive side, they could really set the tone on their first offensive possession of the game. And they got lucky, to be honest. And really, even though Ohio State did not score, their D-line accomplished what they needed to accomplish. You think about a team, you have 7 to 9 players typically who play offense, and then you have 14 players, usually have 2 D-lines and 1 O-line. So you have twice as many people who are going to play defense versus basically one line who's going to play offense. So Ohio State make the offense stay on the field as long as possible, tire them out. And Georgia scored, but it wasn't easy.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be interesting to see if Ohio State now can recreate that efficiency that they had on the very first point of the game. See if Georgia can work for this D the way that their O-line just had to work to get the disc back into their possession. The wind is gusting right now. We'll see the pull come up here from Jason Jones. Ohio State look to get their offense moving. Swinging that over to the far side and putting it up for the huck, but there is Jones in the lane, and he is going to take that one to the ground. Georgia getting a D right away as Jones tries to go for the sideline and it bobbles off his hand. Similar moment to that of Ohio State in the last point. And it gives Ohio a chance to go back on offense, although there's a call here on that far sideline. Looks like maybe some contact in that upline cut.
Let's take another look.
So looks like an uncontested foul, and the stall will come in on 0 here as Jones taps it back in. Ohio running out of options, shoot to the end zone. That one hanging, the layout attempt, but it's run onto the easy pancake catch, and Ohio State through Chase Gregory. All right, that was Sion Agami with the point, get the goal.
And we've seen teams really using the deep space in the downwind end zone effectively. We've also seen teams really throw it out the back, but that was an instance where they did use it very effectively. And once again, we don't see Ohio State's offense stay on the field for very long. Georgia, though, credit to them, they did force a turn and had the opportunity, had a little bit of execution miscues to get there. But now the Georgia O-line has got to find some efficiency and score a little bit quicker.
Yeah, I just saw Sion Agami run onto that one through the pressure. And Georgia will have to get their O-line moving. I think Georgia can take some lessons from that point in terms of the fact that Ohio State is really relying on that huck. The very first play of the game, they went for the huck and Georgia was able to get that poach block in the lanes, and immediately after they went right back to that huck style. So Georgia maybe just needing to adjust a bit on those cuts, adjust that mark a little bit flatter, and maybe a few more of those poach blocks as well. But for now, their offense needing to get something going again. Very early in this game, only at 2-1 now for Ohio State. Resetting the disc and looking for some movement from upfield. It's a little bit of congestion, and they're forced to go for the big around backhand huck, and it's going to be easily picked off. Verma gives Ohio State a chance to break as that one pops over the head as Axel Agami reels it down and now shoots towards the end zone. There's some coverage, but it's not enough. Ohio State will get the first break of the game.
And Georgia had the punt away because they didn't have a lot of options. I'd like to see more handler movement from Georgia, but the fact that Ohio State was able to catch the disc rather than it going to the ground and they're picking it up, then they're already in motion. So the fact that they had more yardage to cover really didn't affect the outcome or the positioning that they needed. They gained those yards back very, very quickly, and they converted so they could register the break.
And now a chance to go towards that downwind side as well, having just shown what their defensive line can do.
But still early on, seems like Georgia's kind of figuring out where they fit, where everything fits from an offensive perspective.
Yeah, and sometimes teams do just take kind of that first few points of the game to get things moving properly. And as long as they're not too disheartened by that early break, that shouldn't be a problem for them. They do want to look to respond right away, though. See a familiar O-line back on the field, looking to some of the same players. See Austin Knabb, Hodges, and Carey out there. Trent, who scored their first goal as well. Hodges acting as kind of the general of the handling unit. That pull is going to sail just out the back of the end zone.
So you see a lot of teams with spotters on this downwind end zone because you have only a certain amount of time after the pull hits the ground to when you check it back in. So sometimes players are sprinting to check it in.
And a mistake right away from Hodges. He put that into the ground. had the open receiver, but it's going to give a shot here about 15 yards from the end zone. Ohio looking for another break. Kroom goes to reset that. It sails over the head of the intended receiver, but Marcus Perry slides. Now Axel Agami to the end zone for the goal. Shorey with the point, the little kick spike, and that is another break to make it 4-1.
And Ohio State finding their rhythm, getting on a roll. But they converted, which definitely took skill to do, but it was as a result of an execution error from Georgia. I will say, though, those swing passes are difficult, both directions, going across the field because the wind is pushing more towards that far sideline from a diagonal perspective. So they need to keep their heads high and figure out what adjustments that they maybe you make from a release point a little bit. Maybe you call a play, but for now, they do get some time to talk about what's happening because we're in a heat timeout.
We've talked about how these heat timeouts can help act as a point in the game for teams to regroup. We are in a heat level 1 warning right now, meaning that the teams take a 3-minute break when the first team reaches 4 points. They then get halftime and they would take another break for the first team to reach 12 or soft cap, whichever comes first. But a chance, like you said, Emmy, for Georgia to regroup and evaluate the things that just went wrong for them in the first portion of this game.
And if I were Georgia, I would treat this as an opportunity like the end of the first quarter or something like that. Take that as a quarter break. Okay, let's put that behind us, but let's come out now with all cylinders firing. We have an offense that we know works. We wouldn't have qualified for nationals if that wasn't the case. And just let's focus on what we do best. Let's not worry about what the other team is doing right now. What can we do in this moment that you have control over your own offensive skill?
Exactly that. Remember the things that are in your control and take advantage of them. These two teams fighting it out for a spot in the pre-quarters. Georgia having beat both Minnesota and California so far. They did have a blowout loss, 15-6 to UNC, the #1 overall seed of the tournament, of course. And Ohio State, on the other hand, have lost a game to Minnesota, but then beat California and lost 15-8 to UNC. So these teams may be a little bit more similar despite the 1-2 versus 2-1 ratio here. And I think Georgia is going to come out fighting in this next part of the first half.
So the teams are coming back to the field. Both teams also have similar colors too. You've probably figured it out, but Georgia's in the black jerseys and Ohio State in the white.
So the teams will head back out to the line. Georgia looking for a response here after a pretty impressive start from Ohio State. We've seen very clean offense. They had that one mistake where Georgia was able to get a poach block in the lane, but immediately upon getting the disc back, they took one throw to get to the end zone. So fairly clean overall from this Ohio team.
So curious to see what kind of play Georgia will come out doing. Just haven't seen a lot from their offensive set. But they were able to grind out and get the hold that they did have with their first score of the game. First and only score of the game.
Andrew Kramer set to pull. Georgia back on offense and in a vertical stack look as they flood to the one side. See a different defensive look now from Ohio, pulling out some zone to force Georgia to do something different as Austin Knabb resets the disc.
And it was something that we saw earlier from Georgia, not a lot of handler movement, so they had the punt deep. So smart on Ohio State's part to come out with something that forces more swings.
Georgia so far working patiently through those swings. Austin Knabb trying to work it through to reset into the middle. Now Jones. Jones puts it to Austin Knabb, who works it into the middle with Trent. Good patience so far from Georgia as they move into the red zone portion of the field here. Now running a bit low on options. Austin Knabb seems to be getting the disc almost every other pass for this offense. Now Jones pops it up into space. Back with Jones. Tapero staying in that near sideline, but now working it across the field, and don't seem to have a lot of options down as Ohio State is staying in that zone look right now.
I like, though, that this has forced Georgia to have more swings and those more inside looks, short passes. They're not being baited by these lofty over the tops that they were doing.
Pressure defense there, but Jones tracks it down. Now into the middle with Tapero. And it's bobbled by Austin Knabb, and that is the kind of patience that a zone like Ohio State is building towards. They want to force so many throws that a mistake eventually comes, and it does, and they've gotten a chance here to extend their lead. Groom looking for the inside option, but a hand block from Georgia. That's a great way to respond here. John Rohrback, and now looking into the end zone, it's gonna float, but the offensive line from Georgia waits for their opportunity, and Hunter Cutts gets the goal.
So Georgia stays patient. They use a lot of short passes. You throw a ton of passes, you have a higher probability that something's going to be incomplete, but credit to their defense for really being able to find that turn, and that was an instance where the deep throw worked. You had a receiver, they were in a better position. You're not just trying to look for that punt.
It's a perfectly placed throw from Jones into the hands of Cutts. Love seeing those ones where the cutter has to make no kind of special play, just perfectly into the hands and no defender even around him.
So Ohio State still up by 2 with a couple early breaks that they've received, or that they were able to earn. Nothing is given out here. But hopefully that hold, when it maybe looked a little bit dicey, is what will help Georgia to be able to take this within 1 and make it a super interesting game.
So on that last point, Georgia crossed over Jones to the O-line. He's now back on the field with this D-line after releasing that pull. He assisted the last point as well, so could have quite a big impact for this Georgia team as they look to get a break of their own, putting on a zone set to get Ohio to try to work the disc up. Moving it into the middle. Now some space on that far sideline with Taylor. Little dishes through the middle of the cup, but not a lot of swing options here as they finally get the reset. Sion Agami looking for the holes. And going 1 and 2, and now opening up a bit more space. Jack Engel looking for those opportunities to gain yards. They're being patient, and then the scoober comes. And now they have space upfield, 10 yards out of the end zone. Taylor goes for the reset, and Georgia staying in that zone look. Gregory finds a hole. Working it upfield through angle, almost a layout. Sianagami hangs on and gets a little dish pass, and Ohio State stay patient all the way through.
And the zone was a smart look from Georgia to keep that deep throw going off right away, because we've seen quick offensive points from OSU, but credit to that lead belly offense for just keeping calm, getting those short, flat passes, using a lot of fakes to move your defender. That's how you run a zone offense right there.
Absolutely, and especially with Georgia staying in that zone look all the way into the end zone. If you can be patient enough to just work it through the gaps the same way you did on the rest of the field, that is a huge credit to your offensive line. I think Georgia might want to think about switching that up, maybe melting a little bit sooner, but that being said, we have seen those zone looks work all weekend so far into the end zone.
And we've seen it successful too. Sometimes when you stay in that zone, when you're in the red zone, it clogs those throwing lanes, so it makes more difficult passes or some poach opportunities. That chance, there was almost the layout block from Georgia, just a little bit late, but that's the risk, right? The reward is that you get the D. The risk is that now that thrower is pretty open to make that next pass.
So Georgia's O-line back on the field. A few new faces on this O-line, so trying to change it up a little bit here as Austin Knabb will get that one under. Fakes the upline shot and looking for the cross-field reset. Rohrback moves that upfield. Cook resetting now just outside of the end zone. Carey looking for that next option. Wasn't finding it, puts it up into the air, and Ohio State is going to come down with that, and it looks like there's a call being made of a push-off. Matthew Cook signaling that he felt contact in that play.
So it looks like going to the observer. I think that was more position than it was contact based on what we see in the replay, but that is not what the replay is not the deciding factor on the field.
But Ohio State retained possession, and they get it moving fairly quickly there. Now looking for their next option as Axel Agami puts it into the middle. Some tight coverage there. Tim Harmody now to Kroom. Noah Kroom puts that one, and we're gonna see Ohio State look at another opportunity for a break here. And Harmony calls a timeout so quickly it looks like he just dropped it to the ground.
Yeah, thankfully the observer saw the timeout sign, because from where we are, we couldn't, but based on his body language, definitely looked like it. That's a wise timeout. You get 2 timeouts per half, regardless of cap situation. This is a chance to go within 1 of half. You're upwind.
And slightly interesting, though, that he called that with so many of his teammates ahead of him in the end zone. You usually see those calls at the end of a huck sometime when your teammates haven't caught up to you instead.
Or if Ohio State had 7 points right now, that would actually take them to half. They are up 3, and of course you want to be able to convert here and keep Georgia from coming within 2. But they still have, if I believe, 1 additional timeout that you would think that they'll likely use going into half if they're in such a scoring scenario.
And this is one thing I think that teams are recognizing with the Heat timeouts as well, that they now have an opportunity to really use those 2 timeouts as on-field timeouts instead of calling them between points. So maybe taking advantage of those 2 timeouts as they take one here. They have a chance to go up 4 points. A huge lead, but almost picked off, bobbled, and then through the gap. Now just on the end zone line. Harmony trying to thread the needle, and he gets it to Luke. And Ohio State sit down in celebration. They lead by 4 points.
So they will join together, and to be honest, I was hoping for a little bit more of a climactic situation from whatever that sit-in was on the field, but you know what? You just scored a goal, so you do you.
See, Ohio State threading the needle a couple times here. They were working with some very narrow gaps, the layout D attempt there, but Harmony fully confident in Luke. Actually looks like Luke got up to leave the celebration to discuss something with Georgia, which I think is a great moment of spirit as well.
So Ohio State just taking care of business so far. They go up by 4, and we have seen leads chip away and tides turn in games, no question about it, but it's usually how you set that pace in the first half of the game. I mean, I guess yesterday, Cal Poly in Colorado, goodness gracious, Cal Poly just came back like a freight train, couldn't stop them. So, but that is the kind of grit and drive that Georgia needs to channel.
Pull is caught by Trent and centered to the middle of the field. Bobbled. The wind maybe just causing Cuts to second guess himself there, and Ohio State with field position here to set their end zone. Looking to Luke, who has to stretch to make that grab, but he's on the doorstep, dishes it in, and somehow Agami comes away with it. And Ohio State on an absolute roll.
And Georgia set themselves up well. They caught the pull, they had an open receiver downfield, but this Ohio State team is hungry and they are just taking ground. I mean, that's a tough catch through coverage, but those types of plays make an already energized team just more and more pumped up.
It's a great point that was through tight coverage. A few of Ohio's points now have been with Georgia really on their backs, but Georgia unfortunately unable to get away with the D. And you've got to feel for them right now, a few of their own mistakes leading to these opportunities. And of course, credit to Ohio State for taking advantage of those, but I think a smart choice from Georgia here to call a timeout before Ohio State has a chance to take halftime.
And if Georgia can score here, they're down by 4. That is more of a surmountable lead than even just down by 5, just because of break scenarios and going on runs and things like that. I believe too that Georgia will get the disc to start the second half. I'm pretty sure Ohio State started the game on offense. So take the opportunities, at least score here. You might not be able to, let's be realistic, you might not be able to get the break, but score here. Ohio State scores, then you get the disc coming into the second half.
Yeah, we've talked about this before, but maybe focusing on games to 3, focusing on the small moments. Like you said, make sure your O-line executes, make sure your O-line gets that hold, and then work on the fact that you need to get breaks back. So the teams come out of a timeout, and I'm sure Georgia here hoping to stop the momentum of Ohio State. And so far, I mean, we've really just seen Ohio State run away with the first part of this game.
Yeah, they have a lot of quickness from their team. You see some height, but so far more quickness.
Pull will come up from Noah Kroom. A blade back towards the middle of the field, but there was an offside called. So the teams will have to return to the line. Maybe a chance for Kroom to put up a better pull.
That's what we talk about. If you, and Keith Rayner, who was on the last live stream, said at D3, they saw a couple times. The first pull wasn't a very good pull. Offsides was called. The second pull considerably better. A little bit of a test swing.
Kroom faking his run up there, and we'll get to go for a third time. And it does look like a much better pull here from Noah Kroom. Gonna land closer into Georgia's zone as Ohio State comes out with a match defense look. Georgia just need to get a hold, but a mistake again. The disc popped up and he tried to get up for that one, but it bobbled off his hand. Ohio State can break to take half. Zach Braun puts that around. And then into the end zone. That one caught the wind, but it didn't matter for Tim Harmody. He keeps that disc in his hand for the break and the goal.
And credit to the positioning from Ohio State. Even though that disc was behind the receiver, he was still able to catch it. But those are those opportunistic moments. Georgia, the receiver on that turnover, he went up, it bounced off his hand the first time, he couldn't get it the second time. Georgia, or Ohio State's score, on the other hand, that wasn't a perfect pass, but is able to complete it. And you know, in a different scenario, maybe that would have been caught on the first time and we'd be talking about something else. But now, Ohio State 6 points ahead.
And a great grab there from Harmody to reel it in for halftime. So as the players take their break, we will take a few minutes to ourselves as well. We'll be back with second half action from this game in just a few minutes. Welcome back to the 2019 USA Ultimate College Championships. Becky Thompson here, joined by Emmy Fitzgerald for second half action of Ohio State taking on Georgia. And Emmy, we saw quite a dominant first half performance there from Ohio State.
And Ohio State is just on a tear. They started off by being very efficient on offense, and that set the tone really from their O-line. Then on defense, they really capitalized on miscues from Georgia, and it's a really contrast, right? For as clean as Ohio State looked on their O points is as disjointed, especially to start the game, that Georgia looked on theirs. And then the score ends up being reflective of that. It's a new half, a time for Georgia to really reset and come out strong.
So Georgia will get to start on offense here as Jones gets that swing over to the far sideline. Has the open cut with Ingley, who goes up to Austin Knabb, but it's picked off. Ohio State starting strong once again, looking for yet another break to add to their growing tally. As they center it into the middle to Harmony. Harmony and Axel Agami have been working in sync throughout most of this game. Agami gets the upline shot. Shorey goes to try to find his teammate upline, but that disc you can see blading down in the wind. Wind still quite strong here in Round Rock. Jones is going to unleash a backhand looking for his receiver in the end zone, but unfortunately Perry was in that space and it was always drifting away there from Tapero.
And Perry's closing speed has very much been on display today. That is not the first time he has outrun his match to that back corner of the end zone.
But right away, another throw blades into the ground, and it gives a chance back to the Georgia O-line, and they're going to call a timeout. And it is very early into the second half, but they know how important every single point is for this Georgia team.
Georgia can't really afford not to convert here, so that was definitely wise to do so.
See if they can convert it into a point. We've seen quite a few miscues from this Georgia team, a few execution errors. See if they can boost their confidence up by executing out of this timeout.
And this is the first time these two teams have met this year. Georgia winning pretty handily throughout regionals as well as sectionals. So they came in, and then they came in playing some of the lower seeds in their pool. So this could be one of the first times that Georgia has been closely contested with an evenly matched team in several tournaments.
So maybe just not totally prepared for the intensity level that Ohio State was going to bring into this game, considering that both these teams are still relatively evenly matched. So Georgia will get us back underway. Still the first point out of halftime here. That disc is going to get put out into space in front of the receiver, Mason Carey, with the goal, and that is exactly what Georgia needed to do out of that timeout.
So they took the timeout. You might think, gosh, that's so early in the second half to take it. But you know what? If you get a point out of it, it was worth it. You can't afford not to start out the second half in a strong fashion. Gives a little bit of rest for your offense, and they just go down that far sideline. But now they need breaks.
Absolutely, breaks is critical, are critical at this point in the game. They are down 5 points here at 8-3. If they can start to go on a run and get that break going, you never know what can happen. Earlier this morning, we saw Pittsburgh down several points to Oregon in the women's division, and one break in that up one end zone, and they were able to get 3 in a row. Fortunately, they weren't able to come back to win this game, but it does show that when you are able to get that one break, it can get that momentum and energy rolling. Cuts with the pull for Georgia.
And Ohio State actually beat Pittsburgh at regionals by 1 point. So this is no slouch team, even though their record to start the tournament wasn't so hot.
And there, the wind takes that one over the head of Neil Taylor, the intended receiver. Here's that opportunity for Georgia to go the full 70 yards. Jones, another huck. He's got an open cutter, but the wind took it a little bit, but it reeled in. Now reset. Ingley puts it into the middle here with Tapero. That one hangs in front of the receiver, but it's caught, and that is the first break of the game for Georgia. See if they can get themselves back into this one.
So Georgia throwing up that huck, and it was contested. Earlier in the game, those contested moments, Georgia couldn't come down with it. Here, they catch it, and that completely changes the course of that point, and they're able to hang on for the score.
You can see the huck there from Jones. He's had a few great hucks so far in this game. Reeled in there by Tapero. And then it was Tapero who also was able to put that assist to Brandon Lee. And maybe the start of a movement here from Georgia.
Georgia certainly hopes so. Ohio State will work their hardest to keep that from happening. Ohio State also won out at regionals and at conferences. At Stanford Invite, they lost to Oregon twice and to Texas and Carleton.
So far, Ohio State has had the momentum on their side, but 2 unanswered points out of half here. See if that will phase them at all as they go back out on offense. This pull comes up. Gonna sail right into the back corner of the end zone. A great pull here from Georgia. Now in Callahan territory as Ohio immediately able to work it out. Ohio State unfortunately turns it straight over, and the pressure defense from Georgia turning up the intensity here.
The pull was perfect.
Layout D there. Chance from OSU, but it stays in the hands of Lee. That one got hand blocked, and then he chases down for the layout. Harmony getting the disc back here for Ohio State. Agami goes for that inside out flick. And now looking for Sion Agami in the end zone, but coverage, and somehow he comes down with it, rips it out of the air between 2 Georgia players. An incredible grab there from Sion Agami.
And even though he was outnumbered in the end zone, Agami just gets up so big. That's what you need to do.
It's an open cut, but the disc hung up in the air, allowing the defense to catch up. Incredible play. And a bit unfortunate for Georgia after such a great start to that point. Not able to take advantage. Ohio State keep rolling so far with a hold. Georgia can start to think about climbing their way slowly back into this game. They don't have to rush it. They've got plenty of time. They do have to be aware of the score, of course. We're going to get another look at this grab. 2 defenders and Agami had his name on that disc the entire way.
Definitely an Agami sandwich right there, but he had the best positioning to start and just went straight up. So really kudos to him for maintaining his ground, and that's such good body positioning and control as well.
This pull is going to sit just into Georgia's end zone, as now Hodges will put it upfield, and there was a pick called. Looks like Trent was quite open. The pick may have happened quite a bit before that throw went up.
The continuation rule always results in a little bit of discussion of, okay, when did it happen? When was it recognized? What's that next throw? Continued, all the things, but gives Georgia a little bit of a chance to catch their breath. And at least right now, they're in a pretty good vertical stack. So nice isolation.
The disc is back in with Mason Carey. Now Hodges finds DiFrancesco. Georgia trying to work it through upfield, and that's a poach block. Not even sure he needed to lay out for that one. OSU get rolling back towards another break here as they are on the doorstep. Little shimmy fake and then into the end zone. Georgia look a little stunned there as Ohio State gets another break to extend their lead.
Well, and once the disc was checked back in after the pick call, Georgia was in a good vertical stack, but then the timing of their cuts weren't great, and then they could improve on clearing back into the stack, because that's how that turn happened, is that the cutter didn't clear back in, so his defender was already there. So if you don't clear, you yourself become basically a defender plus your defender. And Ohio State, they're up by 6 points. They're showing, if you turn it over, especially inside of our field, we're not giving it back.
Basically been the entire story of this game. Every time Georgia has made a mistake, OSU has stormed back towards the end zone. And this time through Mark Luke getting the D there. And as you said, Georgia just not quite clearing with enough intensity. They've done some much better things, though, in the second half. I mean, the second half is a 2-2 scoreline when you think about it. And unfortunately for Georgia, they weren't able to start the game like this.
No, Ohio State, it's like that game Hungry Hippos, where you press the button and the little hippos are trying to get more and more balls because they're so hungry. That's what this Lead Belly team is right now. Anytime the disc is live, they are so hungry to go back and get it.
So Hodges finds Tapero as Georgia look to get themselves another hold. The zone look here again from Ohio State. Hodges will swing that around once again. Faking the scoober now, but back in the hands of Hodges. He's gonna put up a huck. He's got the receiver and cuts in the end zone. It's hanging up, but not, unfortunately, dropping at all as it sails out the back of the end zone.
And this is what we saw from Georgia at the beginning of the game as well. And totally agree, if the stall count is getting high, you would much rather turn it and give OSU possession down here. But they've just struggled to get those activations on offense.
And here you go, the field position pays off. Georgia gets a D back in the red zone, but they put it up, and a layout grab off the block. Hunter Cuts, incredible play on the second attempt. Georgia get themselves another point on the board.
And Cuts was not the intended receiver on that pass, But once it goes up, that does not matter. Every player needs to be so keen. So you see that stays up in the air long enough. Cuts goes in and makes that play.
No, Kroom slapping the ground in frustration. Think maybe knowing he could have tried to catch that D, gave Hunter Cuts a chance for the play, but what a heads-up play to come in and make that effort.
And those are the types of plays that really will energize the team, especially in this point of the game. Cuts was the intended receiver on that big huck pass that was too far out the back, but he was amped. He was ready to score. They gave him that opportunity to do that.
We're going to see several of the same players from that line stay on this defensive line, including the goal scorer, Hunter Cuts. Georgia trying to build some momentum through these players. And we'll see if it can shake Ohio State at all. Will be collected in the middle. Looking for the huck right away. That one's going to carry in the wind and sail past the outstretched arms of Taylor there, kind of wishing that that one had sat down into his hands.
A familiar huck that we've seen all throughout the tournament. You appreciate the angle that the thrower's putting on the disc, but it pushes, the wind just pushes it out that direction.
So Georgia looking for a point here. Cuts tried to track that one down, but it was just out of his hands. And now swinging into the middle with Sion Agami. Gregory thought about the huck. Instead has the inside option with Taylor, who works it around to this near sideline. Kramer puts it up line. The layout attempt for the hand block there on the mark, but it's into the end zone for Taylor nonetheless. And Ohio State keep their O-line moving.
So credit to Ohio State, just firing away. They're figuring out what is working for them in their various matchups. And Georgia just showing so much heart. They are really working hard to stay alive. But those swings are just difficult. They are so difficult. We've seen a lot of those overthrows. Takes a lot of base. You have to really lower your base to be able to throw that with more control and around. And going downwind, especially Ohio State taking advantage of what comes.
Of course, as it stands right now, Ohio State would improve their record to 2 wins and 2 losses, equaling the same record as Georgia. And of course, their eyes will be on the Minnesota-California game this afternoon. If Minnesota can win that, we would have 3 teams in Pool A with the same record fighting for that chance to win the tiebreak.
And then you have kind of a complicated head-to-head situation as well, because I believe Ohio State lost to Cal, right? Or they beat Cal, they lost to Minnesota.
Whereas Georgia beat both Minnesota and Cal. So all eyes will be on that game. I'm sure actually both teams, especially Ohio State, will be rooting for Cal to pull off a win against that Minnesota team. Right now, Georgia trying to create something here with their offense. That zone look again from Ohio State. Georgia has had a significantly better second half than the first. See if they can create something special. Right now, it's looking like it will not be enough, but you never want to say never in these situations. DeFrancesco puts that through.
And part of Ohio State running this zone offense, it will inevitably take longer for Georgia to score, where the scoreboard and then subsequently the clock are both in OSU's favor.
Tapero and Trent. Trent just shuffled his foot in bounds before he caught that disc. They work it through the space. Hodges fakes the swing pass. DiFrancesco now through to Trent, trying to walk it up into this end zone, almost picked off by the defense. Trent to Hodges. The little dish pass into the end zone, and it was just one pass too many. Ohio State gets the disc back. Kroom working through Barry. And gets it right back as he looks for his next option. Reset up line with Axel Agami. It looks like a travel called or some contact off the disc. Either way, the disc will return to the hands of Agami.
And frustrating for Georgia, they had so much patience and good movement. Oh, but they got it back.
Picked off by Georgia, but then the huck straight into the outstretched hands of Evan Barry, who gets the D. OSU moving back towards what would be another break. Barry looking into the middle for Kroom, who's going to put it out towards the sideline, but it sails out of bounds. See if Georgia can take advantage.
So that was definitely a gift for Georgia. And we've seen just inconsistent hucks come from Georgia. So I'm very curious. Okay, they put up the huck right away.
This time, though, it works out for them. Snagged out of the air by the receiver there as John Rohrbach looks to reset it. He finds Tapero OSU immediately into that zone in their own end zone. DiFrancesco, Hodges trying to go 1 and 2. And just outside the end zone here. Last time we saw them in this position, they had a fumble drop, and unfortunately happening again right in the middle of the field on the doorstep, and smart call, Noah Kroom, after a longer point, is going to take the timeout.
And for Georgia, it was just one of those, the disc, it's not a hard catch that you're making, but you turn your head a little bit before you have possession, and that is very tricky. And remember, too, since we are in a level 1 advisory, if Ohio State scores here, both teams will need to take 3 minutes.
Yeah, and it could be a critical turning point or moment for both teams. We talked about the importance of having those breaks with the weather, but also the chance to talk it through with your team, discuss what's been happening, and use these timeouts as true on-field timeouts, as we saw here. Kroom taking this one. You can see now the Georgia coach just directing his team a little bit, encouraging them.
I think these folks are so, it's nice that they have some shade. There are stands with awnings over them. Such a jewel for bleachers. You don't really see that very often, but very well thought out.
And USA Ultimate has set up some tents as well. You can see in the background there the Ohio State women's team watching on in this game. They are currently 3-0 in their pool, en route to taking the top spot in their pool. And Ohio State men here looking to do everything they can to get themselves in a position to make pre-quarters. On track for that right now as this huck goes up into the air. It's going to hang. Lots of coverage under the disc, and somehow Noah Kroom comes down with it. Some players slow to get up. That one also going to hang up. This time it's Jones ripping it out of the air for Georgia.
Tough to get lucky twice on those big hospital passes.
Sion Agami laying out for the D there. At the same time, the layout was coming under, and it looks like there may have been some contact. Hard to tell how that affected the outcome. It was very close, regardless of when the contact happened. Mason Carey, I think, saying that he would have had the catch. So the observer is going to rule that it was a foul. So the disc should stay with Carey. And it looks like he's also going to take an injury sub here. And Austin Knabb will come onto the field. Looks like there may have been more than one injury substitution there.
So Ohio State really trying to stay disciplined and do what they can to put the game away, limit the amount of opportunities for Georgia.
So Georgia back moving through their offense here. Thought about the huck option to Jones, but instead looking for the reset, still trapped on that far sideline with this OSU zone. Now working it into the middle of the field. Trying to reset into Austin Knabb.
It was so weird. I think it bounced off of a Georgia player and went, OSU player, went back to Georgia.
Sometimes how the disc falls in your favor can dictate a game, and Jones unleashing, looking for Cuts, who keeps his feet in bounds. The observer on one sideline was signaling in. The other observer is shaking his head to say no. I would love to see a replay of that one. That was incredibly close from Hunter Cuts.
But he didn't maintain possession either, so that makes it tough. I'm sure he wishes he did, though.
There was a pick called in the middle of the field. That disc is going to pop up in the air, and Cuts gets enough of a touch on that one to push it out of bounds. DeFrancesco putting it to the end zone. Open receiver who has to toe the line as well. This time it's going to stand as a goal. Possession in the hands of Georgia, and they finally, after a longer point, get themselves a hold.
And Roback, the receiver, he's been a little sneaky with those deep shots, has been the recipient of a couple different deeper throws. Yeah, that was that weird moment.
We'll get a look here at the attempted grab from Hunter Cuts. Foot, I think, was in bounds, but dropped it upon contact with the ground and then managed to get the D back. He clearly wanted that disc back into his teammates' hands. This time, though, towing the line again, but they get the goal, and still down here by 5 points with only 12 minutes to go until soft cap. It would take a pretty magical run from Georgia to get themselves back into it.
But this is an opportunity for Georgia to focus on really building up what they can. We've talked about the potentially chaotic tiebreaker situation with what's happening in the pool. So they want to position themselves in the best way possible for what they have next. It's nationals. It's interesting that OSU is so clearly dominant in this game over Minnesota, or over Georgia, but then they lost to Minnesota, whereas Georgia beat Minnesota. You you have to show up to play every single game.
Just goes to show how different every game can be. Pull rolls over in the wind, but OSU looking for a hold here to extend their lead. Puts it up into space. There was a lot of contact between about 4 players there. It's like Chase Gregory was kind of took the brunt of that, and he'll limp off the field. Hopefully he's all right. Some discussion here with the observers.
And there were 2 Ohio State players around, and both going for the disc, and then their corresponding defenders. But a team misconduct foul is being issued.
There was quite a bit of contact from the players, whether it was purposeful from cuts or not. It did kind of come into the back of Gregory, so I think that's probably why the observers have made that decision, although a little bit of discussion here still from the 2. So the disc will stay in the hands of Ohio State here with Axel Agami. About 20 yards, just over 20 yards from the end zone. Centering to the middle, some pressure defense there from Lee, but it's picked off. This time running through the disc, Drew DiFrancesco.
You call that the slap D. Gave no chance for anybody else to catch it because he just slapped it to the ground.
And somehow Cuts retains possession there. That disc was blading towards the ground. He leads out his handler for the reset and gets it straight back. And it's just dropped through the hands, unfortunately, of John Ross Ingley. Can't hang on. Looking for a shot to the end zone, and he found the shot, but the throw, unfortunately, not exactly what he intended.
Yeah, the flick hucks to the end zone have not been as successful as the backhands. Just with the way the wind is pushing. And it went out pretty far upfield.
So Jones now in possession. Jason Jones puts it to Drew DiFrancesco, who stumbled a bit, but he retained possession. Now running out of options, has to put it to Jones, and a stall down called, and DiFrancesco looked like it was close to 10 for sure. He had the disc in his hands for quite some time.
Okay, not a stall.
So the observer ruling that DiFrancesco was able to get the disc out of his hands before the stall was called. So the disc will stay in the hands of Jason Jones. Jones going to cut up line. And now the shot to the end zone. That one's going to catch in the wind and sail out of bounds. Unfortunately for Georgia, there was an open cut, but they can't execute.
That's just the story of the game.
OSU goes for the big hammer over the top, and they find Taylor, who will unleash a huck. And unfortunately, that was about 100 yards, it seemed, away from where the receiver was intended.
So that was a great hammer catch, but maybe a little bit of conservation of greatness. We don't have to put every single ounce of our strength into that huck.
So Georgia looking to get as many points as possible in this game with a possible tiebreaker situation on their hands. Every point matters. If they lose by more than 6 points, they could miss out on the bracket here. And we see a turnover with OSU putting a flick high release into space, and the receiver comes down with it. Right now, of course, the lead for OSU is 5 points. OSU looking to extend it. We're still waiting to get to 12 points. This has been quite a long point, Emmy. As they shoot to the end zone, both players sliding just out of the hands of Taylor. Cuts putting on enough pressure.
And Cuts has been playing that big man role very well for Georgia in this game, but not afraid to pick up the disc also.
That one shot over to Drew DiFrancesco, but it's out of his hands.
Gotta catch that.
Fortunately, much of the story for Georgia today has been their own mistakes. So they go now with OSU to Axel Ogami in the middle of the field. And a big layout to retain possession. Andrew Kramer on the doorstep. Has the little dish pass in, keeps his feet in bounds, and Jack Engel will celebrate that one. They now lead 12-6 in this game. And they will take a heat timeout at this point.
So knowing this tiebreaker scenario, this 3-minute heat timeout is a good opportunity for Georgia to really think about when they're on offense, they'll be going downwind, no, they'll be going upwind. So what can they employ? We've seen they are able to work that zone offense. They've worked all the way up and down the field on the zone offense. But it's just some of those little miscues, throws and catches at the end of the game when you're a little bit tired. Do what you can, though, from a point differential perspective.
I'm sure they've got to be aware that every point counts so much, especially in a pool that could be headed towards a 3-way tie. They'll know that. They'll know that the time is running down here, and they may not be able, or be extremely unlikely for them at this point to make a comeback. But getting in as many points as possible could impact their chances at making a pre-quarter game later this afternoon. Of course, we will have a live pre-quarter game for you on our broadcast in the men's division. We don't know who that game will be between yet.
But we are just excited as you are to figure out who's going to be there. There's so much ultimate going on all over this Round Rock complex, including the clinic that was this morning. I saw that there were more than 75 kids who showed up to learn to play, and really, I'm so glad that they did. Those kids had just literally world-class instruction from those Live Ultimate ambassadors. And it does make a huge difference for a community. I know myself being from the Dallas-Fort Worth area, when the club championships were held in Frisco, you had the whole community, ultimate community, coming out to watch these games. And I was just talking to one of the younger players at League recently, and he said, you know, it was so cool when he was, I think he was probably in high school then, coming out and seeing, he said, that was the best ultimate I had ever seen until that point. And what a motivating factor then for him and his own ultimate career going into college. And then now for this Austin community and really players from all over Texas coming down this holiday weekend to check out everything that's happening at these championships.
When we talk about the college championships, when we talk about legacies and how they start at this event, so players maybe a chance to never know, they've seen some of the club teams play when they were younger. Now they're here on their biggest stage that they've played on yet, and a chance to build a legacy for themselves, build a legacy for their team. We see these two teams battling it out right now. Second half has been a lot slower than the first half. We've seen a 4-4 tie in this game since halftime, despite the mistakes that Georgia has been making. It has been a closer second half, unfortunately, for Georgia. They've only been able to get one break on this Ohio State team so far in the game, and that's not enough in terms of coming back, of course.
And the soft cap is going off in about 30 seconds, so it is unlikely it'll be a game to 15.
So we'll see if this pull comes up before that soft cap horn goes off. The score will be decided after this point. It looks like that will be the case by a matter of seconds as the soft cap horn has gone. So we'll have to wait till this point ends to determine what score we will be playing to. Austin Knabb has been a central handler for Georgia throughout this game, and Sebastian DiFrancesco as well, as DiFrancesco centers that disc and moves it around. Ohio State still opting for that zone look. And Georgia really kind of stuck in this near side of the field. Not a lot of options in terms of moving it further, as now they find some movement to that far side. Bringing it right back here now with Trent. There was a lot of pressure and contact. It looked like Austin Knabb did have that disc in his hands first, so it's like an uncontested foul from Harmony. Sebastian DiFrancesco resets to Tapero. Trying to go for those 1-2 passes to try to make that zone move and find some holes. Now swinging around to the far side, looking for cuts, but it dips down into the turf. And a huge layout D. Tapero read that one all the way. He saw that one coming, and he absolutely flew to get to that disc. Now trying to move the disc quickly, but it was in and out of the hands of DiFrancesco. Once again, unfortunately for Georgia, the execution not quite there. As Harmony tries to put up a huck. It bladed in the wind, but it worked out for them. Jackson Shorey resets the disc to Kroom. Miscommunication on the reset cut. Give Georgia a chance to go back the other way, and they will unleash a huck of their own, looking for Hunter Cutts in the coverage, and Cutts didn't even have to jump for that disc. Just reaches one hand over the head of Kroom, who is smiling and laughing about that point, but a goal here for Georgia.
And Georgia, a little inconsistent on offense, but you have to credit them for forcing turnovers. They weren't waiting for Ohio State to make a mistake. They went to the spot. They were anticipating where Leadbelly was going to go with the disc, and they got there. In turn, they know they have a very tall receiver in Cutts, so find him in the end zone. They've been doing that all game, but that throw, while it was one-on-one, he had that favorable matchup. Send it to the favorable matchup.
Absolutely, and Hunter Cutts has had a phenomenal game as well. He's got the favorable matchup, but he's shown us how quick he can be in those closing speeds as well. Just gonna get a shot here of the turnover. That one was to Cutts in the under position, but then the huge layout D, he was shoulder height there, and eventually Georgia able to work it up to this huck position. See here, Cutts barely even lifted a foot to get to that disc, and when you have a receiver like Hunter Cutts going deep, you've got to have so much trust in a player like him, and why not give him that chance to go up for a sky battle.
And that score could be crucial for Georgia too, if they are looking at a point diff situation. The game's not over, though.
Being said, now that that point has been scored, it will be a game to 14. 2 points added to the highest score as another layout bid attempt comes up, and this one blading, and in this time, here comes the layout D from Austin Knabb. That disc was blading down towards the ground, and it gave Austin Knabb a chance to get a layout block of his own.
That blady look was just an invitation for a layout from Georgia.
Hunter Cuts this time in the handling position for Georgia. Had the option wide open in the middle of the field in front of him, but it elevated in the wind. And there's gonna be a call here. There was about 3 players, kind of a little bit of jostling with each other. Not sure it affected the outcome of the grab. Just establishing the stall count here. Jones will tap it in. Looking for that high release flick, and looks like there was a little touch there from Georgia. Now Cuts on that far sideline. Finds Tapero, who's gonna unleash that disc, sailing up and around, and unfortunately Austin Knabb can't hang on.
And that was when you could see some Georgia receivers going to the other side, but that's when you don't need to jump for if you can anticipate that trash coming to you.
Kramer looking to the end zone. And this is the throw that we've seen so many times. That flick huck on this near side of the end zone just gets carried out of bounds time and time again.
To Georgia with that additional opportunity. They have struggled, though, with their initiation passes, getting started off of a dead disc.
See if they can get something going. That disc is going to sit up in the air, and even a receiver like Hunter Cuts can't get there, and OSU goes straight into the end zone. There was a little discussion, just making sure, I think, that Cuts is okay, but the goal will be signaled. Ohio State takes it to game point at 13-7.
So the field position working out for OSU. And just so pumped up as not letting any past successes or failure, anything else, but in that moment, in this game, they are doing what they need to do. And it's always better when you can create your own success rather than having to try and rely on, oh, if another team wins by this much, then we're in, but if they lose by that much, then we're, you know. So Ohio State comes in and says, okay, no, this is what we are going to do right now for our success in this tournament.
Focused on themselves, and they seem to be having a lot of fun with this game as well, Emmy.
Yes, and that's the important part, is staying loose. They always say you never want to get too excited about your successes, but never too down about your failures either. Maintain that emotional strength and being solid regardless of what comes, positive or negative, but staying loose and enjoying yourself. I mean, you get to be in Austin, Texas playing Frisbee for your Memorial Day weekend.
Gotta talk about how Georgia has had a stronger second half. Said it a few times. This second half is tied as they go for a big huck, and it will be reeled in the back of the end zone. Georgia, a big huck, and they get away with another point here to extend this game, but Ohio State a chance to hold to win this one.
And I will give Georgia credit that they have figured out the distance and the touch that they need to put on their hucks. And they have improved and played significantly better in the first half than they did in the second half than they did in the first half when they came out flat-footed. But you always want to end stronger than you start.
And we mentioned it, the second half could be critical for Georgia when it comes to those tiebreakers. And of course, there may not be a tiebreaker yet. We don't know if California can beat Minnesota. Both of these teams could avoid that and look at themselves just going through. This win was a must-win game for OSU, though, and they have come out clearly fighting and determined to get that victory.
So now OSU is in their game point scenario. So now the onus is on them. Close it out. When you're up, there's no reason to let your lead dwindle and dwindle. Just take care of business. Even that extra 10 minutes or so in between games could make a big difference.
Ohio State looking for the hold for the win. It's going to sail down into the hands of Taylor, who waits just long enough to attack that disc and milks it into the end zone. Ohio State celebrating for good reason.
So Ohio State seemed to agree with our assessment that they need to end the point quickly. So they do that. Georgia, aware of probably what's going to happen, sends 2 defenders deep. But real credit to the team in white for putting it away.
So a big game, a big performance here from Ohio State. It was a must-win situation, and that is exactly everything you want from your teammates. You come out and leave everything on the field in these must-win games at the 2019 USA Ultimate College Championships, and it will be interesting to see how this plays out in their pool. Both Georgia and Ohio State on 2-2 records. It's been a pleasure being with you. We'll be back very shortly with Georgia in the women's division facing off against Western Washington. For Becky Thompson and Emmy Fitzgerald, we will be back with you in just a little while.